Amidst the chaotic rush for gold in Victoria's central goldfields during the 1850s, the need for law and order founded the township of Avoca. Let's take a walk around the town to discover some fascinating stories. Your curiosity will be rewarded. Avoca has the widest main street of any town in Australia. What is the reason? Gold rush fever produced a sudden influx of over 16,000 prospectors into the area after the 1850s. Law and order was critical. Avoca quickly became the focal centre of the surrounding goldfields, timber mills, market gardens and later vineyards. Today the population is over 1,200 and Avoca has a farming and tourist focus. Avoca will reward your curiosity with intriguing stories. Story trails are best experienced using any mobile device with headsets. They are free to download and share. Mobile phone users should enable auto-rotate to allow landscape viewing. How to use story trails. We will guide you to each story point along the trail. When you hear the barking owl, pause the video. Then play when you arrive at the next story point. Your story trail starts at the public car park and toilets in the centre medium strip, opposite the information centre, and includes the Avoca Hotel, historic courthouse, old police precinct, First Peoples, Avoca River, River Red Gums, European and Chinese arrivals, Prosperity, the oldest apothecary, War Memorial, Victoria Hotel, Bullocks and Barrels. Up next, directions to your first story point. Directions to your first story point. Soon you will hear the barking owl. It is the largest owl in Australia with a wingspan of 1.5 metres. Its home is in the nearby Mount Cole State Forest. Try to spot the owl in the upcoming story point images. Pause this video. Tap the screen twice. Can you see the historic Avoca Hotel? Carefully cross over to the hotel. Play the video at the Avoca Hotel. The Avoca Hotel, 1872, is one of the few businesses to have operated continuously since 1854. The hotel has preserved most of its historical charm. Its location on the site of the original 1854 Avoca Hotel gives it strong connection to the town's early gold rush days. In 1865, Avoca had 6 hotels. Today the Avoca and Victoria hotels remain. Directions to your second story point. Stroll south along High Street, past the petrol station and carefully cross Bridport Street, which is the Pyrenees Highway. At 85 High Street you will find the historic Avoca Courthouse. Pause the video, then play in front of the courthouse. The classic revival brick courthouse was built in 1859. The building is one of the earliest surviving courthouses in Victoria, operating from 1859 to 1979. It is now the headquarters of the local historical society, which is proud of its collection of photographs and articles. It is open on the second Wednesday of the month. Directions to your third story point. Continue south along High Street and turn right into the very next street, which is Davis Street. Take the second sandy path on the left, directly opposite the Bowls Club. Soon you will see the historic police precinct on the left. Pause the video, then play in front of the old police residence. With over 16,000 prospectors, a police camp of some 50 troopers was quickly established in 1853 to maintain order in the disarray of the gold rush. The former police residence, 1859, and lockup, 1867, is an early example of police buildings erected throughout Victoria in the mid-19th century. Today it is a private residence. Take a close look at the lockup. Do you think you might escape? From the lockup, you would be escorted to the courthouse to learn your fate. To appreciate the difficulty of law and order in such a wild environment, the following description of the diggings in the early 1860s is appropriate. Shanties, public houses and shops sprung up rapidly and the place was a veritable beehive of industry. The whirring of the windlass, the clink and clank of the buckets, the rumble of the cradle and puddling machines, tents, the lights innumerable at night. The singing, oft bacchanalian, the laughter and the brawls made a medley of sounds. Directions to your fourth story point. Follow the narrow road to the right of the Bowls Club. Napier Street. It is a shortcut to Creek Street. Turn left and follow Creek Street until you reach the Avoca River Lions Park. It's time to meet the first peoples of the region. Pause the video and then play when you reach the Lions Park. The Jajawarung were the first peoples in the region. Their traditional lands generally covered the watersheds of the Loddon and Avoca rivers. We can imagine a peaceful life sustained by the resources of the Avoca River. Take a moment to imagine the many Indigenous gatherings that took place in this idyllic setting. The information posts along the upcoming River Nature Trail give a detailed picture of the river's bounty. Early encounters with white people were both positive and negative. Evidence suggests that smallpox swept through their communities, reducing the population from over 1,000 to under 300 prior to the gold rush era. The Avoca River starts near Mount Lonark and flows north for 270 kilometres into Lake Bale Bale. The river is less than 2 metres deep along its entire length. The river was used for bathing, washing, drinking and also for stock watering. In the 1860s, a section of the river was set aside for bathing to reduce the decline of water quality. A bathhouse provided hot baths at a cost of threepence. Directions to your 5th story point. Locate an information plaque at the start of the Avoca River Nature Trail. Proceed under the bridge. Can you imagine how it was built before concrete was used? Follow the Avoca River Nature Trail and look for park seating. Relax and appreciate the river red gums. Then try to imagine the challenges faced by the early pioneers and first peoples of the area as we take you back in time. Pause the video. When seated, play when you are ready to learn about the pioneers. Apart from gold mining, red gum timber along the Avoca River flourished with many mills. They supplied mine timber, railway sleepers, firewood and charcoal. The main bridge over the river has been replaced twice since it was first constructed in 1859. The large timber support beams that stretched across the river were milled from local timbers. In 1956, flood caused significant damage to the bridge and it was replaced with the solid concrete bridge that you can see today. After Major Thomas Mitchell's expedition, settlers were encouraged to take up land. Europeans flocked to the region to establish large sheep runs. From 1853, gold rush ushered a massive prospectus that swelled the region. As gold became harder to extract, farming along with timber returned to the fore. Early attempts at orchards and vineyards were not that effective. Modern-day vineyards became established from the 1970s. The inevitable clash between the first peoples and European settlers was marked by resistance to the invasion, often by driving off sheep, which then resulted in conflict and sometimes massacres of Aboriginal people. While some Aboriginals coexisted and were employed by pastoralists, a gruesome massacre took place in 1840 at Middle Creek. A cook was found hanging from a meat hook at Glengower Station. Aborigines were found at nearby Middle Creek hiding in a waterhole, where they were shot as they came up for air. It became known as the Blood Hole Massacre. From 1850 to 1870, thousands of Chinese miners arrived in the region to prospect for gold. Resentment of the Chinese at other Victorian goldfields resulted in the Chinese Immigration Act imposing a tax on Chinese immigrants at Victorian ports. Most disembarked in South Australia and walked overland to the central Victorian diggings. A traveller in 1854 described a group of Chinese that he saw. Between 600 and 700 coming overland from Adelaide. They had 4 wagons carrying their sick, lame and provisions. They were all walking single file, each one with a pole and 2 baskets. They stretched for over 2 miles in procession. It was half an hour passing them. Directions to story point 6. Look east. Can you see a white story house along Dundas Street? This building has a unique story. Walk over for a closer look. Pause the video. Then play when in front of the house. The sudden influx of people to the town resulted in an acute accommodation shortage. Sent from Hamburg in numbered planks, Watford House, 1856, was shipped to Geelong. Then it was transported across Victoria and assembled in the main street as accommodation for the Avoca Hotel. See the insert. It was sold 20 years later and rolled down the hill on logs sawn locally to the current site. It was brought back to life across 14 years by artist Lyndall Jones. Today it is a private residence. Directions to 7th Story Point. Walk north along Dundas Street to Cambridge Street. Take a moment to look back to the river and appreciate how the first European settlers saw opportunities for prosperity. This rich farming country was named Australia Felix, or Happy Australia, by Major Thomas Mitchell in 1836. His expedition reported that the region was temperate in climate and better watered than inland New South Wales. At the corner of Dundas Street and Cambridge Street, you will see the Chinese Garden. Enter via the circle archway. Pause the video and then play when inside. The Chinese Garden represents the elements of fire and water, as well as emphasising the unity between the Australian and Chinese cultures in the region. The traditional Chinese pavilion is one of the main attractions. Scholar Rock is a natural formation. There are a wide variety of Chinese and Australian plants that line the pathways. The garden was created by Chinese-Australian artist Lindy Lee. Direction to your 8th Story Point. As you exit the Chinese Garden into Cambridge Street, you will see a rather interesting timber building. It is significant for its construction and place in Avoca's history. Pause the video and play in front of this strange building. Cobb & Co serviced the town from 1863. You are looking at the stables and staging area. It is mainly built from timber sawn locally in times when timber mills were important in the Avoca region. By the early 1900s, Cobb & Co were in financial strife, mainly due to the arrival of railways, cars and the increasing cost of maintaining an expensive East Coast network. Carrying cash and gold, coaches were famously a regular target of bushrangers. Directions to your 9th Story Point. Continue east along Cambridge Street. At the corner of High Street and Cambridge Street, take a little time to consider these two historic buildings and the statement they made about Avoca in its heyday. Pause the video and then play for your next story point. Numerous gold diggings around Avoca resulted in a surge of prosperity. It quickly became the administrative centre for the region. The first bank was the Bank of Victoria, 1854. The bank is said to have been built on the site of an early grave of an unknown timber worker who suffered an accident in the Pyrenees Ranges. After the gold rush era, economic focus shifted to agriculture. Today, Avoca's Mediterranean climate and nearby scenery has made it the epicentre for more than 50 vineyards and bushwalking. Directions to your 10th Story Point. Continue walking north to 133 High Street, Layla's Prescription Depot or Pharmacy. Pause the video and play for your next story point. Before modern pharmaceuticals, apothecaries made medicine for physicians, surgeons and patients. They meticulously mixed herbs and minerals, adding a dash of animal fat here and a bit of earwax there to make potions, salves and balms. Stores were lined with rows of jars containing ingredients and mixtures to soothe or cure human ailments. Layla's Pharmacy, which dates from 1854, is reputedly the oldest continuously operating pharmacy in Victoria. It still has old-style shelving, which once held bottles and potions. Directions to your 11th Story Point. From Layla's Pharmacy, cross over to the centre median strip. Have you worked out why the street is so wide? Walk towards the War Memorial. You can't miss it. Pause the video, then play at the War Memorial. The Avoca War Memorial was built by public subscription and unveiled in November 1921. Inscribed on 4 granite tablets are the names of 137 officers and men, 29 of whom were killed in action. Beside the memorial is a pine tree grown from the seed of the lone pine on the Gallipoli Peninsula that witnessed ferocious fighting between Anzac and Turkish forces in 1915. Over 8,600 soldiers on both sides were dead or wounded. Directions to your 12th Story Point. On the east side of High Street is the Victoria Hotel. Walk over, cross the road carefully. You can't miss it. Pause the video and play at the front of the Victoria Hotel. The Victoria Hotel complex comprises the Stone and Brick Hotel, and stone ballroom late 1850s, and the stone stables 1872 to the rear. The ballroom was a venue for travelling performers and was known as the Victoria Theatre. Like all pubs, stories abound. The case of the snakebite cured by strychnine was indeed a curious one. A serious case of snakebite occurred at Amidst last evening. Mrs. Lose, a resident of Hickman's Creek, was returning home when she saw a rabbit. She picked up a stick to throw at it when she felt a sting in her hand. On looking down, she saw a tiger snake gliding away. She made for a neighbour's place about 100 yards distant, as she thought her husband would not be home. But changing her mind, she went home. There she found her husband, told him what had happened, and asked him to cut off her finger, which had been bitten. She placed it on a block, and her husband, taking an axe, did as she asked. He then took her to Dr. Williamson at the Cameron station, who advised her removal to Avoca. The sufferer was brought here with all possible haste. Dr. Johnson was then called in, the patient then being in a state of collapse. He injected 1/6 of a grain of strychnine subcutaneously and tied a ligature around the stump of the finger. The patient rallied slightly. Half an hour afterwards, the doctor again injected the same quantity of strychnine, and he kept her walking about for 2 hours. After another injection, she was restored to full consciousness, put to bed, and carefully watched. So improved so much that Dr. Johnson this morning amputated the finger, and the patient is now returning to home almost completely cured. Directions to your end story point. From Victoria Hotel, walk south along the eastern side of High Street. Stop for a moment at the butcher shop. Like Layla's pharmacy, the butcher shop is the longest continuous serving butchery in Victoria. Look for the Avoca barrels in the centre medium strip near Bridport Street or Pyrenees Highway. Looking south, you can see an iron silhouette. It should give you a big clue why the main street is so wide. Pause. Avoca's main street is so wide so it could enable large team bullock drays transporting wheat, wool and timber to turn around easily. We hope you have enjoyed your Avoca Town Walk story trail. Has your curiosity been rewarded? Feel free to share this story trail with friends. Happy trails!